throughout the entire meeting if you have any questions, or wait till towards the end. We'll have an open discussion, one specifically around pre-K, but then two specifically open to any questions you may have about the presentation itself. With that, you should all see my screen, and we're going to get jumping right into it. So, welcome everybody to the meeting. This is the Worcester School Boundary and Quadrant Alignment Community Forum number 4. This is taking place virtually. It is May 5th, and we are excited to be diving deeper into essentially the baseline data around Worcester Public Schools and our project in general in regards to the realignment of the quadrants. So my name is Nick Celentano. I am joined by Renee Sullivan and Katie Tartaglia. We are part of Dillinger Research and Applied Data. We are a Connecticut-based nonprofit that partners regularly with schools and districts around all things data. We hope to solve and really work through a lot of complicated problems with the district and the schools through the use of data and engagement through facilitated engagements with the community, various stakeholders, to essentially solve and work towards really complicated problems. We are here to help Worcester Public Schools improve the district's existing quadrant system with a focus specifically on elementary schools and establishing more predictable and transparent pathways for those students to go from elementary to middle to high school. As with what we have been attempting to do in each of these community engagements is to really set the understanding on why this project is taking place. As you all may know, the strategic plan that has been established over this past year has multiple goals. One of them specifically in terms of goal number 3 is around district improvement and specifically in regards to school boundary and quadrant alignment. And so from that perspective, this project has started back in February, is looking to go through the rest of the year as we work towards collecting as much information to analyze and inform the overall scenario design process. In terms of today's agenda, it will be an hour in regards to keeping it quite on time and try to get as much information both pushed out to the community as well as pulled in from the community as well. We'll do some quick introductions. I'm going to pause here for a second. I provided sort of who we are. I do want to take a moment to ask for those folks who are in attendance to take a one-question survey. That survey has been posted in the chat, and it's really just asking what quadrant your students, you reside in, and where your students go. We're trying to get a best understanding to make sure that the representation and sort of the engagement from parents across the entire district is representative of all of the quadrants. And that is something that we've heard very clearly from a lot of parents and various stakeholders. And so given that we do have high participation rates today via virtual, we're trying to get a sense of is virtual programming more helpful in regards to building out that exposure to a lot of folks who may not be able to attend in person. So I'll again ask inside the chat, we posted a quick form. It's one question just to get a sense of who folks are and who you all are in terms of making sure we're getting that information out. We'll go into the project timeline and community feedback. We'll then go into what I think a lot of people have been interested in, which is quadrant and zone data, specifically around school capacity, pre-K, and special education. We'll then open it up to the floor to get as much input as we can, either via chat or if you are as bold, you can basically jump in with the mic and sort of ask questions and engage with us at the end of this presentation. We'll then go into next steps and continue the project. So in terms of thinking about what realignment is, right? In many of these types of projects, I think the standard term is redistricting. But in the case of Worcester, the scope and the size of what we're attempting to do is actually bigger than just simple redistricting. So when we think about realignment, it is about changing school zones to achieve a specific purpose. And in the case of Worcester, we're really thinking about how to optimize and think more clearly about the quadrant system, which is really another way of saying how kids move from elementary to middle to high school. We know and appreciate that there are certain schools across the district that have a lot of students, and there are certain schools that have few students. And so beyond just thinking about capacity, right, what Worcester is really trying to get at is ensuring that the experience of each student is the same across all schools, no matter where that school is within the district. It's important to note that as we look to design a new set of boundaries, both for elementary, middle, and high school, the plan is for the school committee to be voting on the final set of scenarios at the end of this year, probably around November, and the plan is to implement those changes, meaning we'll switch over to that new scenario in the 2027-2028 school year. So currently we are in the 25-26. We'll be in the 26-27 next year, and so we're talking about a year and a half away. So, in terms of why realignment is right for Worcester Public Schools, there's a couple benefits when it comes to thinking about how to take a moment and redesign how the district is sort of organized. One, given what we know to be true about the constraints of certain facilities, the age of certain facilities, and I think the enrollment at certain buildings, right? There is an opportunity here to rebalance out what buildings have in terms of overall enrollment. And that ultimately will improve the student's learning environment in terms of ensuring that the classroom experience and the class sizes are equal across the district. We want to make sure that the student's path from elementary to middle to high school makes sense and it's clear. One of the things that we have definitely heard from in terms of parents is that it is really confusing in terms of understanding both the current layout of the boundary system as well as, especially if you're on a middle school, high school boundary line, where your kid will ultimately go from elementary to middle to high school. And then finally, there is an opportunity which we're really excited about to rethink both start times in terms of some elementary schools, but more importantly, that will help drive an efficient use of buses that can help minimize, I think, walk distances. One of the definite things we've heard from parents is that ultimately getting to and from school can be quite tricky and can be quite challenging. And so ultimately, if we can try to increase the amount of folks that can use buses, given the improved efficiencies, that is ultimately one of the goals that we're going to want to try to achieve. It's also important to note a couple other things, right? At the end of the day, I know we're on community forum number 5, but this project really has just started. We are in the process of analyzing some of the initial baseline data. We are still in the process of collecting input from parents and students and staff, and we're still building the understanding and the context of what is happening currently within Worcester Public Schools. So at this moment in time, there is no anticipation closures of elementary or comprehensive high schools. And that's sort of an important point. There may be some identification of new buildings to be able to leverage new and potentially shift elementary schools. But at the end of the day, we're not going into this project thinking that we need to be closing schools. The quadrant boundaries will adjust to better align with capacity. It's important to note, and we've covered this in a previous presentation, where the overall growth of Worcester Public Schools has been fairly marketed over the past 10 to 15 years. It has grown, it will continue to grow, and the important thing to understand in Worcester is that it's not growing evenly. So certain pockets of Worcester Public Schools, or rather, I'm sorry, Worcester, has seen a huge amount of growth and others not. And so that's why we're starting to see pockets of strain at certain schools where we're seeing tons and tons of students and other schools seeing fewer and fewer students. We do feel there is potential for transportation enhancement. That is a priority within the district and one that we're looking into. And ultimately, the scenarios and sort of the modeling of different scenarios will be informed by both qualitative and quantitative data. Quantitative data that we can get from quantitative data in terms of being able to collect as much student data from the student information system as possible, but then qualitative data as well in regards to input from from the community, the stakeholders, et cetera. I see just a comment real quick, Renee, in terms of the PDF slides. Can we or have we posted the links to the website?
I shared it. I will share it again.
Thank you. So Renee, my colleague, is posting links to all of the presentations online inside the website that you can follow along with as well. That will also have all of the translated website presentations as well. And then finally, community feedback is critical. We are working towards getting as much exposure across the entire district as possible, and we will continue to do so as the project goes on. In terms of key stakeholders and roles, obviously there's the superintendent who's setting the goal setting and providing the visioning. We do have a working group that is composed of various district leadership. As well as parents and nonprofits. One of the pieces of feedback that we've received is making sure that that working group has as much diversity and exposure as possible to across the district. So we're happy to announce now that the working group has parent representation from each of the quadrants, as well as various nonprofit folks. We did hear during the last parent engagement that it would be nice to see some staff level or really school level staff participating in the program as well. And we are looking to add those individuals. We have been engaging with students as well, and we're trying to figure out ways to incorporate their voice in the working group as well.
Well, I don't have it.
In terms of Dillinger, that's who we are. We're helping to facilitate, analyze, and help co-design a solution that works for Worcester. And then finally, in terms of the school committee, or rather, I'm sorry, two things. Community stakeholders, that's you all, as well as all of the other various stakeholders. We're trying to gather as much input, both from a context standpoint, but then absolutely when it comes to scenario feedback, we want to hear as much input as possible to be able to incorporate your voice into the scenario development. And then finally, the school committee. The school committee is there to approve and finalize the recommendations around what scenario or really model the Worcester Public School District will proceed with. So important to note, the school committee has the final vote, both in terms of the final model and the implementation process. And they will be a part of the process starting in June, where we will go and present and then proceed through the iteration of various models. In terms of the timeline, this is a fairly just quick highlight of over the next 8 months or so. We are basically moving from data collection to iterating on the scenarios to ultimately that final decision in November when we present the final set of recommendations to the school committee. So up on top, you can see that that is basically the areas that we'll be engaging with the school committee. September timeframe, we're hoping to iterate a couple times with the school committee around various models. And so that those dates are to be determined. But ultimately, those final votes will happen either November 5th or the 19th. On the bottom, you can basically see that this is a combination of the working group meetings, who we are generally meeting with monthly, and the various parent engagements, or rather community engagements that we have planned for and will plan for. So in terms of the current set of engagements, we've met on the 23rd, April 15th, and April 27th. Today is May 5th. We'll be meeting, obviously, with you all right now and posting this video to the website so people can watch it at their leisure. And then next week on May 13th, that will be a Spanish led version of this presentation. That was, again, more input that we've received from the community about making sure that we're trying to create as much accessible presentations in the languages that I think are impactful to make sure that people can get where they or get the information they need. We are finalizing dates for what the plan is to engage in August, September, October. We are planning on sending a paper version home in all backpacks here in the next couple weeks. On that handout, there will be explicit dates that will be scheduled currently now for the fall timeframe, so people have a complete awareness months in advance of when and how we plan to engage the community. So again, in terms of just emphasizing your voice matters, we've been hearing a lot of various input, both from emails and the community forums, and we just wanted to take a moment to sort of highlight what have we been hearing and ultimately what are we doing with that information when we hear it. So must include parents and student voice ASAP. So that was heard loud and clear. We've worked really hard to identify various parents that can take part in the working group. We've done that through a lot of the wraparound coordinators and principal sort of participation to help identify those parents. We've included a lot of invites for nonprofit organizations as well on top of the district to make sure that the voices that we're hearing is very robust and diverse. Strong desire for transparency to see the data and understand the process. We will be sharing out the data in an Excel format today via the Zoom, and it will be posted. That has basically the capacity information that we're about to go over today, and as well as enrollment. And so for that, I would encourage you, please check out our website. We're trying to regularly post both the presentations, the various data points, through all of the conversations that we've been having. We engage with the community partners, opportunity to reach more representative population. And so that is something which I'll have on the next slide. The wraparound coordinators have been doing extensively in terms of the partnerships with a lot of the nonprofits from across Worcester Public Schools. There's equity concerns in terms of the disproportionate impacts, inequitable representation in the process. And so, again, that is really trying to build out both the awareness, which we'll take a pulse check on in June through Parent Square, but really trying to maximize all the various mediums in which to get exposure to. So, we are trying to use Parent Square. We have created a parent group. Anybody who's interested to join, they are absolutely can join into that parent group and get regular updates. We are regularly utilizing the newsletter from Worcester Public Schools, who's been doing an excellent job trying to push out as much information as possible through the newsletter and their websites. We're using the wraparound coordinators. We got feedback that sending hard copies home of different things would be very beneficial. So we will be doing that in the next 2 weeks once we've encompassed ultimately the information that we feel is the most important to get out to folks at a one-time sort of handout. We're also collecting as much information as we can via surveys and interactive web apps, and we'll continue to do so throughout the middle to the end of summer once the modeling starts to happen. And then finally, opportunities for better alignment and family support through the Bell schedules in pre-K. That is one of the comments that we're going to be talking about today, as well as in terms of pre-K, as well as we'll be following up around transportation times as well. So that is a subcommittee of the working group that we've done in regards to thinking through transportation, as well as pre-K. So other work that we just wanted to elevate, we have met with the Principals Academy. So we've met with all the principals to start to engage with them. They have been instrumental in helping develop and identify what the capacity of each building is. We've met with the Superintendent Student Advisory Council and have informed them of the process as well as gotten their feedback. We plan on doing that again. They were an amazing bunch of students. And we have regularly started to meet with the wraparound coordinators to make sure that they are the ones who are engaging with the parents on a regular basis. And we want to make sure that they are on the same page as we are, and we are of them in terms of the communication, both for what we want to communicate out and then ultimately what we're hearing from various parents. The FACE outreach has basically participated in over 40 plus events through various communications in March and April, including sharing at the ACE adult ESOL classes. And so we are trying to be as creative as possible in terms of identifying various ways to get as much information as possible out to various folks. We do have the frequently asked question page on the website. I would encourage you to check that out, which has a lot of great information. The data page has not been added to the website yet, but it will be. We will be sharing that data today via the Zoom, and ultimately it will get posted in some form or fashion on the data website. Or rather, I'm sorry, on the website. And then developing the handout printable for families. Again, that is going to be a focus as well. And then we've been working towards identifying charter and private school enrollment to answer a couple various questions that we had received from various folks in regards to why are we seeing a slight decline in enrollment around certain parts of Worcester Public Schools. So in terms of thinking about all of this data to include the survey data, we've received about 320 responses via our survey to get as initial information, which has been very informational. We are tracking to what percentage of those responses are coming from various quadrants. I would say at the very least, we'd have at least 15 to 20% of responses from each of the quadrants. We would love to see more responses from the North and the South, which has the highest number of enrollments. And so we're going to work towards trying to expose that, increase that exposure to a lot of folks as well. So again, we are doing today's presentation on May 13th. We're going to do the exact same presentation, but it's going to be in Spanish. And then we will be publishing out when and how we are going to be engaging with the community following our meeting with the school committee. All right, so jumping into it in terms of the actual data itself, we want to kind of go through a couple different definitions. So school zone and student enrollment. School zones, fairly straightforwardly, are designated geographical areas within a school district that determine which school a student attends based on the address. So each elementary school and middle school and high school has a defined boundary that if you are within that boundary, you either are slated to go and enroll in that school or you are eligible to apply for a lottery position in that school. And so ultimately, those geographical boundaries is a lot of what the work is going to be in regards to thinking about how to redesign those boundaries so that we have, I would say, a healthy amount of students who can go to each of the schools. Student enrollment is the total student population size in terms of who is attending and who is slated to attend a school, but it can also be broken down by various population descriptions or demographic or student groups. So it's not only important just to know the total enrollment, but really break it down on a student demographic level to understand what does the student body look like at each of those schools. When it comes to school capacity and utilization, and we're going to be talking a lot about this, especially in today's meeting, because at the end of the day, each building is a unique building that was made at a different year, was made for different purposes, is a different sized building, and could be in different varying levels of repair. And so from that perspective, right, it's important to understand what or how many kids can that building, I would say, safely and correctly educate, and then ultimately how many kids are actually going. So when we think about an overcapacity or a school that is overcapacity, right, it's a school that is overcrowded or has inadequate resources, and the facility conditions are basically such that the class sizes are larger than either the average or larger than what we would want, right? Because when we think about your principals and we think about your school leadership and district leadership, they have a vision in regards to how they want to educate their students. And so that can be somewhat prohibited if you have too many kids and there are just too many kids in a classroom. So that is how we think about overcapacity. In terms of undercapacity, it's the opposite problem, right? You have plethora or you have tons of different rooms, but you actually don't have enough students to fill all of those rooms. Not a horrible problem, but can also create or create challenges in terms of making the school feel welcoming and having a positive culture. And so there is a right balance of what we're trying to achieve when it comes to capacity. And generally, a good rule of thumb around optimal capacity is about 80 to 90%. So what that means is if I have 100 chairs that can be populated with students, I want about 80 to 90 students to fill those chairs. That gives me enough space to be able to add some kids if they move in. It also gives me some flexibility in terms of how I'm sort of organizing the overall school in general. So let's start at the highest level first when we think about the district overall. Couple different ways we can look at utilization in terms of what we're trying to accomplish, both today in terms of the project. We're thinking about it across elementary, middle, and high school. So very specifically in terms of the number of buildings, right? You have 33 elementary school, or rather buildings that are housing elementary school kids. You have 4 middle school and about 7 high school. And so what we did is broke up the enrollment. That's enrollment as of October 1st of this year, in terms of the SY 25-26 school year. And then in terms of total number of seats, again, this was something we worked very closely with the principals to identify based on the classroom and based on what the average classroom size is, how many seats does each building have? And so what we were able to do is calculate, okay, how many total seat capacity there was. And that got us to basically an average utilization. And so here on the right-hand side, you have about 83% for elementary school buildings, 77% for middle school, and 78% for high school. So a couple things that I just want to sort of flag, right? Generally speaking, this is a good thing. We have worked with districts before that we were actually at 96, 97% utilization, and that makes it so you don't have any wiggle room in terms of how you balance out the geographical regions. In this case, we feel very comfortable that, okay, we have a lot of space to be able to work with to create healthy environments within each school. This does not mean that there's not one school that might be over 100% and one school that's below 65%. And that's part of the challenge is reorganizing all the geographical enrollments. But generally speaking, to sort of set the baseline in terms of where we're operating from, there is plenty of room here in Worcester Public Schools to be able to realign various schools. All right, so jumping into each quadrant. And again, I think if you want, Renee, we can post the file. We're giving you a file that basically has all of the schools along with the current enrollment and the utilization and the capacity. And so you have it for your access. You won't have editing rights, but you can make a copy of it and then analyze it to your heart's content. So in terms of burn coat, what we did is wanting to flag, it becomes a little bit overwhelming when we give every single school and what their capacity numbers are. Hence, we gave you the file. And so here, what we're trying to do is just flag for you which schools are over that 93% threshold where we feel like these are slightly over capacity, and the ones that were below 78% that we feel are under capacity, right? These are, for all intents and purposes, schools that should be looked at in terms of thinking about what their geographical boundaries are. Now, I do want to kind of flag for folks, when you start changing one geographical boundary, that has a domino effect where lots of other boundary changes have to be made. So for now, for simplicity, we're just flagging for you all which schools are we seeing have the highest overall capacity. So in the case of Burncoat, your Burncoat Middle and your Burncoat High have on average about 96 and 95% capacity. Now I'll throw in one other wrench, right? We all know that there is a new Burncoat High School in development that will come online in the next couple of years. And so as we think about the scenarios, that is going to be the main building that we're basing a lot of the modeling and the scenarios off of. So again, not to complicate things, but that's just something to keep in mind. In terms of the undercapacity buildings, this is Francis McGrath, Lincoln Street, Clark Street, Burncoat, and Norback Ave. And again, those are the schools that we're seeing the lowest student to seat ratios. All right, so notable out-of-zone enrollment. Again, this was just something to kind of keep in mind too in terms of what students are currently doing. And so here, as an example, Clark Street East, which is up here, Clark Street, what this says is 44% of students who attend this school are attending it from out of their elementary school zone. So they have 44% of students who are not geographically assigned to go to that school, and they are currently going to that school. This does not include special education kids, right? Because that's a specialty program. And so here, right, you're what we call the general ed kids. Those kids, that is a high percentage of kids who are attending this school that technically, from a geographical standpoint, should not be. And so Burncoat Middle is at 20%. And then we wanted to kind of flag for you the dramatic changes in enrollment. And so from a decrease perspective over the past couple of years, your Lincoln Street, your Francis McGrath, and Norbuck has seen significant decreases in enrollment. And then there were no schools that we flagged that showed huge increases of enrollment. And so as we proceed through, we did the same exact thing for each quadrant. So I'm just going to quickly highlight and not sort of I'd say beleaguer the point, but you'll kind of follow me through here. So in terms of the North, three schools that are showing, I would say, significant overcapacity, Belmont, Grafton, and Rice Square. And so when you're probably asking the question, right, from Rice Square perspective, like, how can you have a building that's over 108%, over 100% capacity? The way that works is ultimately either your average class sizes exceed what the guidelines are. And so ultimately, right, you could have a classroom. We've determined based on either board policy that there is well, I'm making this up. For second grade, it's 22 kids, right? If you have average class sizes that are 25, 26, then you have now exceeded that 100% capacity. It could be that, or in certain circumstances, you might have to be using other rooms like the music room, the gym, or other non-classroom rooms for classroom purposes. And so, yeah, you have these situations where you could be, again, bursting at the seams in terms of the number of enrollment. In terms of undercapacity buildings for North, we have Worcester East Middle, which is at 77%. Again, in terms of just thinking about where those schools are that we're showing a lot of out-of-zone kids attend, we have City View East and Roosevelt East, which is also a special education hub. However, just as a reminder, this is not including special education counts at about 35 and 38%. And then from dramatic changes in enrollment, we show decreases in Union Hill, but then we also saw huge increases in Rice, which is continuing to grow even after moving the sixth grade out. So just for folks' reference from previous presentations, right, a lot of what we were seeing in terms of population growth within Worcester was on the borderline between North and Doherty. And so one of the pockets of definitely growth that we're seeing is in that sort of area. In terms of the South, we didn't actually have any buildings that were over capacity in the South, but we did have a fair number that were under capacity. And so Goddard, Sullivan, Claremont Academy, and Vernon Hill all were again either kind of low or significantly low, especially at that 50%, 57% capacity level. So this is an important to note. I'm just going to pause here real quick, right? Each quadrant kind of has some of the same challenges, has some of the different challenges, right? So in this case, under capacity is a different problem than overcapacity and requires a little bit of a different adjustment based on what the population layout looks like in terms of Worcester. And so part of this challenge is really dealing with the fact that you can't pick up a school and move it. And so we have to be thinking through and adjusting various boundaries based on the current geography of both where the building is and ultimately where the population is. In terms of notable out-of-zone enrollment, we had South High, Goddard, and Claremont Academy. Again, not as significant as some of the other schools that we saw in some of the other quadrants, but definitely sort of notable. And then dramatic changes, we saw decreases in Columbus and Woodland Academy, and then Goddard and Canterbury. In terms of overcapacity, so in terms of Doherty now, we saw two different schools that had significant overcapacity, one being Chandler and one being May Street. And then only two in terms of undercapacity, one being Doherty Memorial and then high school, as well as Worcester Dual Language. But they are adding grades, and so that ideally should hopefully help work out that undercapacity problem as we move forward. And then again, notable out-of-zone enrollment, Doherty Memorial High School, Flag Street, and Chandler, and then decreases in Jacob Hyatt, Magnet, and then increases in Nelson. So part of this, and I know we have been working towards this, I do want to thank the principals exceedingly because they put in a lot of work to basically build out what a capacity for each building is and would look like. And so that is a lot of what this basically has been informing in regards to the analysis. So it took a little bit of time. We were able to get it. We are now aligned across all of the buildings in terms of the same way that we're measuring capacity. And so we're excited to be able to sort of use this data moving forward. Part of the, well, I'll get to that in 2 seconds. All right. So that's the capacity numbers. Again, you all should have access to that via the document or the Excel spreadsheet that we pasted into the website, as well as being posted online. So now part of the first step in this process, right? So we've identified all of the buildings that are over capacity. If there was an easy and a perfect world, we would tinker around with just those geographical enrollments. That would solve our problems and that would simplify the process. But that's not exactly one, how easy it is, because again, everything has a repercussion in terms of what you change. But then two, there's also desire to adjust and really think through pre-K and special education. And so part of what we were hoping to do today was quickly go through what we know to be true about the pre-K and then ask and get some feedback from the folks in the room, as well as understand your all's sort of thoughts about the pre-K as we move forward. So we wanted to kind of quickly
Nick,
summarize.
I'm going to
Oh, I'm
jump
sorry.
in. Can you
Yes,
go back
please go
actually
right.
a slide before we get into these details? I'm noticing some similar questions in the chat
Oh,
around
perfect.
assumptions behind what's included in the capacity numbers and how we're deciding like special ed cases. Like there are different decisions in the formulas that we use that look at substantially separate classrooms as a different level of capacity than a general education classroom. Similarly, pre-K is a very different kind of a classroom and different size than other classrooms. And so I would invite either you or Katie to chime in to any of the more specifics. And I know Katie's been responding in the chat, so please keep the questions coming. But I did want to make sure we included a conversation around what is actually included in that capacity number and what's included in the enrollment number. And I think more importantly, like what's excluded in terms of the kids we count and how we count them.
Yeah. So, okay, this is a great question. You can have, so basically the unit of measure, generally speaking, is a classroom. However, that classroom can have different purposes, right? A general ed classroom, on average, has about a class size of 22. A substantially separate classroom has at most a classroom of 15 and in some cases 12. So to everybody's point, right? Well, if you make all of the classrooms substantially separate, the capacity will look a lot different than if you make them all general education classrooms. So this is a conversation we were having with the principals, not around what their current situation is, but ultimately, if you have a building with, and I'm making this up, 20 classrooms, right? Like what generally speaking would be a average looking school building, both in the context of the number of general education classrooms and the number of substantially separate or special education or specialized classrooms. Part of this is unique to the neighborhood. There is an average, right, in regards to the overall district in terms of the average percent of students who are special education. But then, to everybody's point, there's also pre-K classrooms, which can be at most 15 and need to be specialized in regards to bathrooms being co-located. And, you can't have giant classrooms, you have to have smaller classrooms. So this is what makes it kind of tricky because you're sort of designing the ship as you're flying it. And so, in regards to some assumptions, what we did was work with the principals to kind of calculate what the, again, average capacity of each of their buildings would be, assuming all things being equal. You had the average look of a general education set of classrooms, pre-K classrooms, so on and so forth. Pre-K, and this is one of the reasons why we're going to jump into pre-K, there are a couple things that have to happen first to be able to really get tight in regards to what a good capacity is. Pre-K is one of them. One of the decision points that we were going to bring to the school committee and that we want your feedback tonight is how should we be thinking about pre-K classrooms across the district? There are sort of two mantras or two approaches that we can do. One is have a pre-K classroom at every single building. There are pros to that in which you're creating a neighborhood environment where kids can walk to school or be at least relatively close to their pre-K classrooms. You can create that sort of continuity between pre-K to kindergarten to first and second and third, fourth grade, so on and so forth. You get used to your principals. And so there is that sort of neighborhood feel to it. That creates challenges from a transportation perspective and though from a staffing perspective, because now you have potentially isolated pre-K teachers that maybe don't have the professional community that they could lean on if they have multiple classrooms of the same type. So there's another version in which you could have a preschool hub in which you have all sorts of preschool classrooms in one localized building. This simplifies transportation and also, again, provides that professional community to be able to work together and have again, that consistent academic experience across the district. There is some logistical challenges with that in terms of, is there a building that can house that many preschool classrooms? And how and where is that building located? We ultimately understand that there are a couple different Head Start centers within the district. Ideally, you want them located in those high need areas where the parents don't have to travel across town. And so part of this is understanding that we're operating within the constraints of various buildings and the current setup of the district. And so part of this kind of question or conundrum or first really decision point is, do we try to have a lot of single classrooms located all over the district, or do we try to centralize a lot of the pre-K classrooms in those high need areas to sort of maximize who is participating in the pre-K programs? Does that help, Renee?
It does. I think that hits on some of the things that have been raised. I do see that Liz and I believe Sarah also hit on a topic that we've heard a lot in the previous forums around equity. So how are we factoring, or how's the district thinking about factoring in equity as we think about capacity numbers? So the specific question that was raised is around student need and English language learners as well. And so a classroom of many children that have higher needs is not just necessarily special education needs. And so how do we think about that? And there's lots of nuances there. So I'm going to kind of pause and kind of let you weigh in a little bit about how conversations around equity have been coming up.
Yeah, so I think it's definitely come up in the working group. We've gone through this exercise. To give you an example of what we're dealing with or kind of doing in the working group is we had the conversation around preschool and preschool rooms and the centralized hubs as sort of a blue sky theory, right? Like if we could have, and we did this by quadrant, like how are the current layout of preschool classrooms now? What are the challenges? Are the not challenges? Are they located towards high need areas? And we tried to understand, right, is there an opportunity to create a hub? And if it was, would it be located in the right area? Where are the current levels of need? Do we have enough capacity? And ultimately, I think to this point, right, like what are the pros and cons of doing each? The challenge with this is each quadrant's kind of different. And each quadrant has, I think, their own unique either approach or set of needs that we need to address for. So part of this conversation is really thinking across the quadrant level and saying, okay, there's not probably a one size fits all. So what does that mean in terms of what we can accomplish? We've acknowledged the fact that North does not have a Head Start program. And so we brought in the head of Head Start in the district to try to talk through, okay, what are potential solutions and or options that we have when we're thinking about the interplay between Head Start and some of the preschool. So in terms of equity, I would say ultimately we're trying to really acknowledge the fact that there's not one size that fits all and really thinking critically about each quadrant in regards to their specific needs. All right. I'm going to press for time here. So to that point, we wanted to get into the preschool sort of layout real quick. And so this is a little bit of a quick deep dive within each quadrant. So in terms of burn coat, right, we know that overall, and again, this is sort of an important point, there's been a 26% decrease in PK over the last decade. So we know that there's probably two reasons for this. We've identified, given sort of trends and overall population demographics of Worcester, the overall population is getting older within Worcester, so we are anticipating a slight decline in enrollment, and that usually starts at the lowest cohorts. But we also identified the fact that there are many different half-day programs and full-day programs within pre-K. And so part of the feedback we would love to get from parents is this idea or understanding is, I think it would be beneficial to think through how we can create full-day programs across the district and not just have half-day programs, because we suspect, our hypothesis is that half-day programs don't exactly if it's a half day program, I don't think a lot of parents are eager to jump into that, given that there's a lot of balancing of how you can get your child to and from the program, and then how do you deal with that if you're working, so on and so forth down the line. So that is a consideration that we're trying to elevate and get feedback around. We did try to flag for you all how many PK students live in the quadrant, and then how many students attend PK in the quadrant. Right. So we have 175 kids who live in Burncoat, but we actually have 205 preschool students who attend preschool in the quadrant. So a lot of kids are actually about, what, 25%? 12% of the population is coming out of the district into Burncoat. They do have a Head Start program at Greendale, about 100 students. And then we flagged for you where those schools currently are located. And this is sort of an important point because part of the exercise that we did when we were working with the working group was understanding that right now, having the preschool and the special education hubs located together can be somewhat challenging both for the building and for the school leadership. So part of the initial conversations that we've been having and that we've heard is that separating out the preschool classrooms and moving them either to new buildings or doubling down on existing buildings to build out their number of classrooms would be an advantageous approach to how we think about preschool. So that is an option that we're running through. We had the working groups identify, are these located in a good area? Do these buildings have the capacity? So on and so forth down the line. So in terms of special education, we have a special education hub in Norback Elementary. And then we know that 1,095 of the 4,645 students living in Burncoat are identified as special education. And we have 981 special education students attending schools in Burncoat. Again, knowing that we have a student kind of crossing different boundaries, that's where you're seeing those levels. I'm going to kind of speed through this just for the sake of time because I do want to get sort of input from you all. In regards to the north, we're seeing very similar things. There is a decrease, not as significant as Burncoat, but a decrease in PK enrollment over the last decade, about 10%. Here we have a lot more PK students of about 300, but we have much fewer PK students attending within the quadrant. This is a gap that has been identified. We know that there is no Head Start location within the quadrant, and there are 4 schools that house, I would say, traditional PK classrooms. along with you have your special education hub, which is Roosevelt East. And so there you have the breakdown of overall enrollment numbers. Again, pretty much the number of kids and the number of kids attending are very similar. In terms of the South, significant declines in PK as we've seen before. Similar rates of kids who live in the quadrant and kids who attend in the quadrant, about 295. You have Millbury Head Start, which has about 107 students. And again, a much more spread out set of schools with terms of PK classrooms. In terms of special education, you have again a special education hub at Gates Lane, along with again similar percentages of students both within and attending within the quadrant. And then finally, Doherty, again, consistent decline in PK enrollment. Similar to Burncoat, where you have you have about 213 PK students in the quadrant, and you have significant more students coming into the quadrant to participate in the PK program. They do have Mill Swan Head Start with about 167 students, and they have 5 schools with PK classrooms, again, broken out. Special education hubs is at Nelson Place at Jacob Hyatt, and then again, similar numbers of special education. So to kind of like sum this up, what we know to be true, and I think what's an important aspect and where I would love to open up the floor to hear folks. I was hoping to be able to break up into small quadrants, but we're running out of time. I'm sorry, small breakouts. But ideally in future events, especially around scenarios, we will be breaking up into breakout groups. We are knowing 2 things. The special education hubs are an integral part of each quadrant and play a huge role in the education of students with higher needs. And so from that perspective, by moving the preschool students' classrooms out, it really gives the district flexibility to be able to establish and ensure that the hubs are serving all the students that they need to serve. So that is definitely a note of sort of how we want to approach it in terms of thinking about it. In terms of the preschool approach, though, there is a lot more up in the air in regards to what we think is good and pros and cons to either having a preschool classroom in every single building or centralizing a lot of those preschool classrooms in a group. I can tell you, given some of the numbers that we had, just having one preschool classroom in each elementary school is not going to cut it. There is, based on capacity, going to need to have some buildings that have at least 2 preschool classrooms, whereas some will have 1. And so that kind of creates a design challenge as we move forward. So I'm going to pause at 6:23. I would love to open up the floor, both in the terms of feedback around preschool, what your approach is, or questions, comments about anything that we've talked through thus far. And Renee, I'm going to help you can curate. So if you would like to continue to ask questions in the chat, you may. If you want to raise your hand in the menu, I'll happily call on you and you can unmute and just talk and ask questions.
I'll elevate a point that Holly Montero shared about transportation with pre-K because it has come up in the working group, and there's this being early in the project, there's no solution yet or no definitive choices yet, but the idea of how do we expand pre-K in a way that allows both access because you might be able to walk there or some way to get to your destination more safely and quickly. So transportation is a really, really big decision that I think we need to continue to think through as a working group. There's also oh, go for it.
Sorry, Renee, I'll jump in. So I know there was a question about sort of out of zone limits. I think that is definitely something that we've identified. I think that was kind of a surprise to all of us in regards to the high number or the high rates of out of zone kids. That is a conversation that was brought up at the last community meeting, and that is something we are engaging with the district to think through process-wise what makes the most sense in terms of thinking about how and when a student is allowed to sort of go out of zone. I would say, given the complexity of the current layout of boundaries, which include satellite boundaries, cross boundaries of elementaries to middle schools, and sort of the confusing nature of some of the boundary lines, it's not a surprise that this sort of exists. And so part of, I think, our recommendation as we move towards a final set of models will be sort of leaning in around this concept of like, okay, how or if are there any changes that have to come with those rules and exceptions when it comes to being within boundary to attend those schools. So that is, excuse me, something we are working on.
Related to the zone piece, I see that Liz has a question of the language we're using around living in the quadrant versus attending in the quadrant. And then once you answer that, we'll go to Lakia.
So is the question, what's the difference?
Yes.
So basically, I'm going to use what's on the screen right now, West Tatnook. Basically, if your resident is within this sort of, we'll call it a rough square, that is living within the boundary. Or in the context of the quadrant, right? Quadrants are usually defined by the high school and middle school boundary layers. If you live within that boundary, that is you living within that geographical area that would have you slated to go to that middle school or high school. Oh, thank you very much. That's great. If you attend, though, you could have students who live in West Tatnook but are attending Tatnook Magnet. That is then now outside of your geographical boundary where we would anticipate you going. Now, it gets complicated because of various schools that may have citywide boundaries, and that was a good feedback that we heard that we'll do on the school committee meeting. We'll start to layer in, okay, there are a set of schools that have citywide boundaries, and then they differ from quadrant boundaries, but it is confusing, and I don't deny it, but it is really trying to identify and align where you live outside of lottery or magnet, where you live should coincide with where you're attending. Generally is how that works. Is it Lakia, I believe, has raised her hand?
Yes, it's Lakia. Thank you. So my biggest question would be towards the pre-K aspect. I have a son that's coming out of pre-K, but I'm also going to be having one that's going into pre-K around the time of this big change. So how would that work when it comes to being in a full day class? Like, would that be offered, especially with kids who aren't qualified for Head Start? And I know that I live in North Quadrant, and my daughter attended Belmont for pre-K, and she's been there the whole time. But my son, he's special needs, so he has to attend outside of the quadrant because there's nothing available in North Quadrant, which puts him at Burncoat.
Right.
So how would that work with kids that are going into this new whole quadrant boundary thing when it comes to them going into pre-K? And does it affect kids who are chapter 74 who are attending outside of their quadrant as well?
So can I turn it around? What would you like? Because I mean, we can design it a lot of different ways, and part of this is, given your circumstance, which I don't think is entirely unique, right? In regards to you have kids going everywhere, right?
Mm-hmm.
Based on their needs, what would make sense to you in sort of how you would want to design it?
I would
If that's
definitely,
bothering, let me know and I'll answer. But I feel like it would be more beneficial to hear from you.
definitely, I would like to see a SAIL program in the North Quadrant. There is no SAIL program in the North Quadrant at all, which would make some parents who are not able to have transportation, it makes it difficult for them to get back and forth to school,
Yep.
especially if transportation takes an hour to get to you in the daytime. My son, he's on the bus for an hour just to get over to Norbeck.
Yep.
So a SAIL program in my quadrant would help. And also full day pre-K would help because a 2.5 hour day definitely is not
Right.
helpful for other things that are going on in families' lives. Like we're a working family. We don't have sometimes where we can just easily go and pick up a kid or get them off the bus. So that definitely hinders a lot of families. And I think being able to have access to transportation for kids who do attend, like my daughter, she attends Belmont. We're definitely in walking distance, but there's kids that I see walking further away than I am. There's kids almost to the Shrewsbury line that are walking because they're still considered 2 miles away. So they still have that long
Yeah.
walk. So how do we adjust it to where kids are getting transportation and not just to Plumley Village, to kids that are walking all the way from Shrewsbury Street all the way up to Belmont Street School?
Yes. Okay. So I can't promise we'll solve all the problems, but what I'm hearing loud and clear, and that was extremely helpful because this will help inform, I think, how we try to design the solution. Full day programming, I had sort of mentioned, I think is a sort of a big talking point. Having the sales program or at least sales programs represented in each quadrant, I think is a key point. In terms of the transportation piece, part of what I had sort of indicated around thinking about start times, we think if we can align the start times better, because right now there's an hour and 15-minute sort of separation, will help increase the amount of school buses that can be used and thus decrease the overall walk zones that currently exist. So that is something that I can't promise, but we are trying to sort of fit. So that was extremely helpful, so thank you. I do want to flag, it is 6:30. I'm happy to stay on and answer questions and keep this going, but I just, for those folks that I know have taken probably dinner time to come and join, if you can't stay, we'll post this video to the website with all the remaining questions, and so really appreciate you all taking the time to come on and take part in this conversation. Marissa.
Hi, I'm actually a preschool teacher at Worcester Arts Magnet School. Um, and I just had some ideas on, the pre-K situation.
Please.
So we would love, a whole preschool center, but I don't think that we have money or something to do that to build one. But if we could have like one or two early childhood centers, maybe combining two quadrants together, as an idea, or do one like hub, like there's a sped hub, do one pre-K hub school per quadrant, um, and add Head Start programs in those high need areas. I think would be helpful, like North. Um,
Can I ask a quick clarifying question?
yes.
When you talk hub or centers, is there a certain threshold or number of either kids or classrooms, or is it just, more than two or three classrooms?
Oh, more than two or three.
Yeah, like what would be a, constitute a, because we're trying to say like, okay, we can double down in a couple different areas, but if it's only four classrooms, I don't think that gets at what you're hoping for in terms of a hub. So, well,
Well,
I won't hold
how?
you to it, just
Yeah, no, no. So, like in Doherty quadrant right here, you're showing Tatnick dual. It looks like there's two, four. Oh, there's more than that because it's Nelson Place too. I would say like 10 preschool classrooms. Like
Yep.
putting all of the preschool from that quadrant at one spot.
So just using this as an example, again, not to put you on the spot, but like, so
Yeah.
if you had your way and you could wave your magic wand, you would want to take all of these and try to centralize them. I know there's the Head Start program at Mill Swan. I know the building is somewhat challenging, but like thinking about solutions in terms of kind of combining those slightly tighter together would be helpful.
Yes. Yes.
Perfect. Okay. That's
Um,
super helpful.
and then adding more full day in general. And then I just had a thought too. I don't know if the full day preschools could be like if a school starts at 8 o'clock and ends at like three, whatever, if you could do pre-K from like 9 to 2, would that help with like transportation at all? Because there's no set time that preschool has to be in school for.
Yep.
So we can, you can play with those hours a little bit. I will say that the 2.5 hours is very challenging. That's what I do.
Right.
And to be like one or even two class, we have two now at my school. Even that is like challenging being in an elementary because it's going up to sixth grade. There's little 3-year olds with 12-year olds or however old they are, but it's just too much of an age range. Never mind the fact that it's just us two preschool teachers. Nothing at staff meetings are relevant. There's just a whole thing staff wise. In terms of PD and things like that we are facing, prep times, music class, art class, a lot of them don't get those things. So if we were all together, we would be hopefully more apt to tap into programs like that, like everyone else gets too. So,
I love that. That's immensely helpful feedback. So thank you.
yep.
Andrea.
Sorry. Okay. So, lower my hand. Fabulous. Oh my God, the preschool teacher is a genius. I love it. I absolutely think that would be fantastic because right now, I didn't know how I felt about the special education places in the four quadrants in a hub. But if you take and you keep the special education area, in a hub, and then you have a preschool in the hub, and then you do all these little things, so everything's all at the same place for all four quadrants. That's what we're trying to get at. So I think that would be amazing. Absolutely full day kindergarten, preschool. And then my concern is for some of the smaller, um, well, the sub-separate classrooms that should still be in all four quadrants, specifically the language-based classroom, but there's only one in all of Worcester. So what are we going to do? We're not going to disappear, are we? How are we also going to get that equity? And I know that the classrooms could be absolutely utilized a lot more. And that way it's basically for learning disabilities, dyslexia. It's just not as talked about or not, everyone talks about the SAIL program. We don't really talk about the lab and the language based. So once we do, though, I do believe there'd be many children that could benefit from that. What about us? Have you heard about us? Do you know about us? Are you thinking about us? Type of questions.
And we're talking the special education hubs, right?
Well, yes. So, yes. It's called a sub-separate classroom.
No,
Yes.
yeah. When you said us, I just want to make sure. Yes, no. And so
Yes.
kind of like what I'm hearing, I just want to make sure,
Mhm.
right? Like
Yep.
ultimately there is inconsistent access to various special edu or
Yes. Yes.
separate classrooms. And what we would want to
Yes.
make sure is that each program is available at each hub.
I would love that. And I thought it was a dream until like we started talking. That would be absolutely amazing because then they wouldn't like there's one again. So we can't advertise it and fill it up because, 25,000 students, that's not going to work. However, if
Right.
there's four, absolutely. And then you are taking those children and again, I don't care where you put them, but all together. That way the teachers are together, the special needs of that group are together. And then, and that would balance out if you're going to put all the preschools in one place, then you got those rooms open. So, you're opening up a little bit of, yeah. I'm telling you, oh, I like it. Yes. And then you
So
have the dual language learners as well, one in each quadrant. Absolutely. Yes, I love it.
that is part of where the district leadership wants to go is again that access, equity and access to all of these various programs for the special.
Yep.
So part of the steps, right, that we have to achieve is first and foremost figure out where the pre-K classrooms are going to be so we can extract that out of the capacity. That then, especially if we're taking pre-K students or classrooms out of the special education hubs, we are trying to ask, okay, ultimately, how much space do you need, right, to be able to house these programs? That again will take out the capacity, and then we're left with the different available capacities that we can kind of leverage for general ed classrooms. I think it's
Right.
important to know. So, yes, hear you loud and clear with the special education hubs, the pre-K hubs or centers. I think we can get a couple center, right? Like I'm trying to think of like locations where this could actually happen, and I know that's the trickiest part. I do hear you loud and clear, centralizing more, having more centralized groupings of pre-Ks. I think we can definitely do. But I
Yep.
say that as like, because I know in a perfect
Right.
world,
No,
I'd
I
love
know. We're
four,
just
four, 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 four.
right,
It'd be
right, right,
perfect,
right.
but working towards
Right.
that,
I
and I hear you.
understand.
But
Yeah.
this is the type of input we need, so that when we go to the school committee, we can be like, hey, this is what we're hearing from folks in terms of
Right.
what would be beneficial.
And I can't do it off the top of my head because I'm bad under pressure, but do you know how many different separate classrooms and opportunities and programs there are? Because there's tons, but you have to go to this school way far away. You have to
Right.
go to that. So if you could, I don't know again what it is off the top of my head, but there's 30 programs and then, blah, 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 all, you know what I'm going for, right?
I'm picking up what you're putting down.
Yeah.
I got it.
Thank
So
you so much.
no, thank you. That's really great. Is it Fiona?
Yes, I'm Fiona. I
Yeah.
know you were mostly talking about elementary and pre-K, but can I bring up something about the high schools?
Uh, you can. I think I know where you're going, but please, would love it.
Yeah, I mentioned
Or
the first meeting that I attended with you guys, but
I thought that was,
they
yeah.
don't, we don't have the same programs in all of the high schools. So is there any way, besides, dividing everything up, that you can encourage them to have like at least the same business program and CNA program and engineering program at all the high schools? Because it's not fair that only two schools out of all the high schools have engineering. And that's not something that they need, shop equipment for. They just need computers. And they already
So this, yeah, no, I'm sorry to interrupt. Please finish.
I'm done. I'm done.
No, so I would say this. I've been in contact and been working closely with the director of college and career readiness. They are currently doing a strategic evaluation and a strategic planning for all of their secondary programming. And so ultimately, they're trying to collect as much information as possible. I think to both ask the question to your point, like what programs are popular, what programs are funded through the state, what programs are setting kids up for success after they get out of high school. Knowing what I know about pathways, and I'm not hearing this from them, but I just know it is not too realistic to assume that each comprehensive high school or tech school would have the same type of programs, because of both, I think, the size of the programming, the needs of the facilities. And so I think in general, what you see in a lot of districts is specialization across various schools. And so I will pass your feedback because that is something she is very interested in understanding what's the feedback that we're hearing about secondary programs, to see how they can better align it to the needs of the district. I'm just in from my own experience, given across a lot of districts, I don't know to what extent they could have equal programming across each school. So, but I will definitely pass that on and see what we can do.
Thank you.
Absolutely. And is it Satya?
Yes, hi, sorry. Can you
I'm
hear
sorry, how do
me?
I pronounce your name?
Satya, you got it
Satya.
right.
Okay,
Thank
perfect.
you. So
Yep.
I had a question. Are you, in any form or fashion, considering thoughts about preschools that are not affiliated to the public school, and we are sending over children for services? Is there any thought in how that's going to change or priority given to those children?
So are you talking about charters and private schools or the head?
We are a nonprofit organization, and I know there are a bunch of nonprofit preschools that run um, programs in the Worcester area. So we do send children out for referrals to public schools. I was wondering if in this process of changes that are coming about, are there going to be any consideration to make room for these children that are not in the public school setting at this minute?
Well, let me know if what I'm saying makes sense or if I'm sort of missing the mark. Is current so part of this is understanding, I think, current capacity, right? So if we go through the numbers, I believe in terms of capacity, we have more pre-K capacity than we need in terms of kids, assuming the Head Start programs are currently still in operation. So part of the scenario design, as we think about these hub locations or these sort of multiple locations with pre-K, is finding that right size. So are you suggesting that there could be an influx of pre-K kids that we're not even tracking, and so that we have to be careful in terms of the capacity limits that we're having?
Yes, because as a preschool coordinator, I send over students to get referrals and services that we are not able to provide
Right.
in a preschool setting, and the wait list or the time lag is so big, or
Okay.
some of the children get denied the services because we think that they need it, but they go through the screening and they come back saying if they will not be given allocated transportation, but if the parent is willing to do this, they may get some additional services. Parents are working and they simply cannot do that. So I was wondering if, again, to kind of say if there is going to be any allotted seats for these children coming from programs outside of the public school system.
Could I ask can I ask your organization so I can reach out to you afterwards and we can kind of talk?
Sure, I'm from Rainbow Child Development Center.
Okay. If
And
it's
we are at,
okay,
yeah,
we'll
absolutely.
reach it because you're bringing up an interesting question, right? Because if I'm showing that, again, we're kind of dealing with the pre-K classrooms are declining, or rather,
Right.
but you're telling me there could be something, and I agree with the full day programming. If we do full day programming, we could actually see an increase in participation. Part of that is going to be right sizing the number of pre-K classrooms, but I
Hmm.
think more importantly, what you're getting at is ensuring that whatever solution we come up with, there's space in which to grow if the pre-K programming needs to grow.
Exactly. Thank you.
Okay, awesome. Thank you very much. That's very helpful.
Thank you.
I think we have time
Marissa,
for two more.
two more questions. Great. Is it Marissa? I think, have you spoken already or
I
you're a new
did.
one?
I wanted to answer her question.
Oh, okay. Great. Yeah, if you could, that'd be great.
Next year, they're creating a new program for preschoolers called the CARES program, and it's going to be instituted in 3 elementary schools. My school is going to be one of them. Jacob Hyatt, I believe, and Canterbury. And it's going to be basically the kids that aren't going to really need a preschool classroom, but they do need those types of services that Satya was just talking about. So they're going to come, it'll be a 90-minute class session, either on a Tuesday, Thursday, or Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And I believe they're going to be bused to help service more needs of the kiddos in our district. And then there's also a CPPI grant with the early childhood is working with community organizations, the community daycares and things, to kind of align them with what we're doing in the public schools. So it sounds like maybe they're not in contact with her, and the next person that's going to talk may know a little bit more about that. But I just wanted to add and answer her question.
Love that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I have been looking into the CPPI grant actually, so thank you for bringing that up again. Appreciate it.
Kim.
Hi, good evening. Great conversation. My favorite topic, preschool, really, truly is. And I'm a community leader at Edward Street, and we work across across Worcester and then in Central Mass, but deep work in Worcester with early education and care programs, Head Start program, the Worcester Public Schools, really trying to help kind of crack the nut of how we can provide coordinated support for families so that they can have a variety of choices and have a place for all preschool children if needed. So this realignment project really important, and it does intersect, as you're hearing, with a lot of these comments of what programs the school wants to put together, what where Head Start might be located, and the
Yeah.
existing infrastructure in early childhood, which outside of the schools is full day, full year, and that is also important for a significant segment of our population. The CPPI grant is something that we help bring to Worcester and are part of the planning. The challenge there is, it's state funded and the state budget's pretty tight, and it has to grow to let more folks in. But that is a fantastic model of bringing an itinerant team to programs to serve children inside those existing classrooms, which adds capacity back in the district because they don't have to have a seat set aside. We have them, the children are enrolled in these programs in the community. We don't need to bus them around. We can bring the adults to them and really amplify the capacity that our system has in the community. So I think a mixed delivery model with some good solid planning on where preschool is and where it could go with our estimations numbers in terms of births and percentage rates of needs, we really can create a much more holistic plan at this juncture, because it's really a funky juncture between community and schools. It doesn't really live only in one of those areas. It's really a community charge to figure out preschool and how we can best address all the needs of all children in our district. Happy to talk more, but I just wanted to throw out there that the providers of those centers, just like Rainbow Child Development and others, are really looking to be at the table to help solve the problem on the capacity, but also on what's able to be provided to young children. And we know higher dosage of preschool is going to be better, and bringing those supports into the classroom is great, and keeping little ones off of very long bus rides or breaking up their day, getting them on and off the bus is something we should try to avoid. Thank you.
Thank you, Kim. Super helpful. It has been brought to our attention in terms of the list of schools that we had passed out, all of the schools that are not zoned or are sort of like not zoned schools, I should say, were not added to the list. We're going to add them here in the next 10 minutes. And so you'll have a full, complete list of schools and their capacities. So, all right. So I think if I could.
Real quick, Fayana, is your hand up to from last time, or did you have a final comment that you wanted to make sure we captured?
I think she was up from last time. Yeah,
Great.
there we go.
Okay.
All right. I believe that brings us to our conclusion. If there have been questions in the chat that we have not gotten to, we will make sure to update the frequently asked questions and make sure that that is pushed out. And so I do want to sort of just bring to everybody's attention a couple things. We do have a Spanish-led version of this conversation next week. We will be going to the school committee in June to talk more in detail about the pre-K potential way forward. And then that will ultimately, once we've identified how we want to approach preschool and the special education hubs, that will then set the foundation to have a lot of meaningful design conversations around various scenarios. Those scenarios will start to be published and incorporated into our conversation come August timeframe. All of this will be detailed in a one-pager as well as our website that we'll be pushing out here in the next couple weeks. We do have, and I would like to toss out, an email that you are absolutely encouraged to email your thoughts and opinions. That email can be found on the website in terms of where and who to access. And as always, we want to say thank you very much. We know that obviously this type of project can be stressful, and taking the time, especially on a school night, to come and provide your feedback is really what's going to make it a difference, given that we can incorporate as much of your feedback as possible. So thank you all very much for taking the time, and look forward to continuing the conversation in future engagements and emails. Have a wonderful evening.
Sorry, can I interrupt real quick? I don't know how to raise my hand, but
It's such a good ending, but yes, no, please go right ahead.
so I know certain people, like my mom bought her house knowing like what district the schools were going to be in. So how is that gonna affect like when you guys switched the border of what schools the child goes to if she literally bought her house depending on what school the child would be going to?
So if I could, you're talking about housing or home values?
No, so my mom bought her house knowing what schools my daughter would be
Oh,
going to. So with you guys switching the border of where she would be attending, how is that gonna affect?
okay. So that's a great question. So thank you. How old is your daughter, if you don't mind me asking?
She's 6.
Okay, perfect. So she has entered into kindergarten and first grade, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, she'll be going to first grade next year.
Perfect. Okay, so generally speaking, it would be the district's desire, and they have sort of expressed this, that we try to minimize the disruption as much as possible. Part of the conversations as we figure out what the new modeling and the new scenarios could be is discussing various what we call legacy options in regards to if your child is currently attending a school, can they finish out that school before proceeding on and matriculating to middle school and high school? Or middle school to high school, whatever the case may be. That will be part of the conversation that we have with the district leadership, the working group, you all, and the school committee in regards to what is financially possible and which to sustain that sort of level of legacy. And so that is the intent. Whether we can pull it off will involve a lot of different modeling. But then on the flip side too, there's a lot of people who will be interested in also just attending their new school if that's how it plays out. So that generally is one of the trickiest pieces as we go through these projects, is figuring out that transition period. And so that is one conversation that, as like I said, we identify the scenario, we'll be talking about that. But the scenario, the district is interested in trying to figure out as much or as a sizable legacy option as possible. Does that answer your question?
Yes. And just one more question. So I
Please.
know we were talking a lot about special education. So my daughter is on the spectrum of autism. I did try to get her a 504 or IEP. She wasn't eligible for that, but there still is concerns like how big the classrooms are going to get with her having autism, like an overcrowded classroom, even though they don't find her to be IEP or 504 plan.
Right.
That's still a concern of overstimulating big classroom sizes.
Well, and that's exactly what we're trying to accommodate for, is to make sure that there are not classrooms that are bursting at the seams. So I hear you loud and clear in terms of trying to sort of fix that problem.
Okay.
Awesome. Thank you
Yep.
very much for your
Thank
thoughts.
you.
All right. So I will bid everyone a wonderful evening and look forward to engaging with you all later. Have a wonderful night.
Thank you.